I was the best tipped person in that restaurant, not because I was the most attractive or because I was the fastest. It was because I set really clear expectations that I could consistently jump over.
Then you have this dynamic in our industry where none of us have ever really had to justify buyer agent commission.
And it was always poker for me, right? Because it was reading situations and taking what I knew and taking what I thought the other people knew and moving forward with the best thing.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Broker's Desk. We took last week off. Taylor and I were down in San Diego, as a wise man once said, founded by the French. Down at the Real Rise conference, Hatch was there. Taylor and I were there. We were there with 1,300 of our closest friends and family. Last year, Hatch, how many people were at the conference last year? Like 600?
I think it was 800. I think 800-ish. I'm not sure. I didn't count them all one by one, but I should have.
Yeah, you should. You really should have, actually. So it was great this year, and Erik's just one of our favorite people. We, had heard of the legend prior to coming to Real, but since being at Real, he and Taylor and I serve on a unofficial committee of growth Jedis or whatever they call us, that try to help provide some counsel and guidance, a little bit of feedback, and it's a decent amount of complaining to Real Brokerage as we continue to grow. And it's like we debate the highly contentious issues of like, what should the company be posting as their social media posts and fun stuff like that. So Erik, welcome.
Hey man. Of all the people at Real, and I don't say this sheepishly, you are two of them. You are two of my favorites, no doubt. And it's been so fun and an honor the last couple of years to be a growth ambassador with you guys, and to not only gain different perspectives from the dozen or so people that are in the room, because I've grown to both hate and love it. I hate the fact that there's always a little bit of tension of how to execute. And I love the fact that we are passionate people trying to build something, and Real allows it to be moldable clay instead of just coming in and saying, this is what it is. I hope you fit into this box. Like, we're all tasked with the challenge and the gift of growing the company. And I see your character shining through, and I love who you guys are.
I appreciate that. So tell everybody, you've got super cool story. Like, you grew up in South Dakota.
North Dakota. Don't you?
North Dakota.
There's a big difference between South Korea and North Korea. It was a 50-50
shot. Yeah, you're more of a North Korea guy. Yeah. All right. So you grew up in North Dakota. Yes, spent some time in the youth ministry. What is the Cliff's Notes version of Erik Hatch? Like, so far in the first 30 years of life, you've accomplished a lot. So tell everybody a little bit about it.
I wish I was just 30. So born and raised in Fargo, North Dakota, just like the movie, the TV show, it is exactly like that here. Well, weather-wise, it's like that. Nonetheless, there's not as many murderers as you would expect. So through that,
sure, the drug trade isn't quite as robust.
That's right. As I've grown up in this community, I've tried to run from it a number of times. I tried to leave it in high school. I grew up in a single parent home. My mom was fighting stage 4 cancer, so I stayed close to home and went to college at North Dakota State University, like literally a mile and a half away from my house. And then when I was in college, my mom passed away, so I was orphaned at 21. And had hopes and aspirations of going to impact lives. And I wanted to be a motivational speaker as a 21-year-old. Like, what a weirdo to think I want to be a motivational speaker at 21. And I had a gig in Minneapolis, which is the closest big town that we have, about 3.5 hours away. And I chose to pass up that gig because it felt like this idea of a hit and run ministry. I was in there one day and gone the next, and going from school to school, engaging and entertaining kids. And they're all going to be sobbing at the end saying, we're best friends forever. And then I would just go and repeat the next school the next day. And so I hated the idea of a hit and run ministry. And instead, I went to the church that I was baptized and raised in, and they brought me on as a youth director. And so I worked with kids for about 10 years. I was a part-time worship leader. and through that spent my full time really passionate about helping young people. In fact, if I could choose today, if I had to work with adults or like high school students, I'd choose high school students 7 days out of 7. Yeah. They're just so much more simple and innocent and green and joy-filled and happy than adults ever are. Adults are just crabby a-holes, man. It's super tough to work with some adults.
Yeah, and I know you and Taylor are a little young for this, but when I was a kid growing up, there was a country music star named Garth Brooks. And
never heard of him.
Yeah. So one of the songs he's famous for was I'm much too young to feel this dang old. And like for me, I actually feel the exact opposite. Like I'm much too old to feel this young. And so I agree with you. Like I chalk it up to just my sheer immaturity because I'm actually a very immature person. But Taylor and I in our, we spent some time in youth ministry type activities and it's always like, man, if you give me the opportunity to work with a couple of teenagers or work with a couple of grizzled old, like struggling adults, I'm like, dude, I think I could actually help a teenager. You give me some 45-year-old, in like deeply ingrained struggling individual. And I'm like, man, that seems like trying to steer the Mississippi with one hand, but you give, a couple of teenagers can be. So like at some point though, the youth ministry thing maybe either ran its course or you just saw a need to
I was broke. Yeah. I'll give you the real inside scoop is, I was a professional minister and I was also a professional gambler. I was a professional poker player in the early 2000s and my professional skill turned into an acceleration of my addiction. And so I have a gambling addiction and it just started to compound on itself. I haven't gambled now, at least at a table or the internet for 15 years. I'm an entrepreneur, so it feels like a gamble every day. And yet it's all the same as you. And it was always poker for me, right? Because it was reading situations and taking what I knew and taking what I thought the other people knew and moving forward with the best thing. But I was financially in massive debt. And so I got into real estate simply for money. And then I was able to eliminate that debt I had in my life. And my wife is so filled with forgiveness. God bless her. And we were able to start anew. And then I was continuing on dual vocation of working at the church and working in real estate. And then we were battling with infertility issues. And my wife and I tried and miscarriages and all the headaches and all the in vitro fertilizations and the other things. And the only way I could fund being a dad is if I had a job that paid me more than $40,000 a year. And so I jumped into real estate full time, first to eliminate debt, then to fund being a dad, but I never saw it as my ministry. And that's when I failed the first time. I blew up my business. I had great success in 2011 and 2012. At 2011, I was a solo agent. I sold 52 houses my first year, and that was all reputation and open house business. And so I worked really hard to grow that. And then I started a team like everybody's supposed to, and we sold 192 houses my first year in 2012 as a team. But I was 113 of those 192. So I was 60+% of the business, thinking that I was building something that was really successful, but it was built totally wrong because I wasn't treating it as my ministry. I wasn't treating it as the space and place in which I could pour into people. And so I got the gift of starting over. I was a Keller Williams agent and they kicked me out in 2013. And I thought, man, this is a stupid company because don't they know who I am? I'm Erik Hatch. Like, that's the story. So very briefly is I'm a big deal. And I thought that my crap didn't stink. And when I went to my team of 13 and invited them all along, everybody said no, except for 2 people, a buyer agent and an admin. And so I literally started over, realizing that I was the problem. And so I rebuilt it. And from there, in the last decade or so, we've sold about 7,000 houses in Fargo, North Dakota, maintained a 6 to 10% market share with our real estate team and how we function. And I now try to find people that are the same as my youth group kids. I find people who are likable, coachable, full of energy. They want to be a part of something special, and they're dumb enough to believe that we can actually do it together. There is a blissful ignorance and a naivety that I love being surrounded with, not because I can mischievously manipulate my way through it, but it is instead hopeful and aspirational people that believe that they have the power to change their stars. And that's who I want to be surrounded with. That's in fact why I found myself at Real as well. Is it's that same idea, is it's a group that hadn't arrived yet, and it's consistently aspirational to try to improve itself. It's wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and a bunch of people that think that they can change this industry, and we're going to be foolish enough to actually do so.
When I was standing on the boat last Monday night, it was 3 hours into this cruise, and we were all wondering when the dock was coming. But I found myself standing next to you, and I got to meet your amazing wife. And as you're recounting this story about how this all started, this real estate journey from way back then when you were giving up your gambling career to become a real estate agent, standing there on that boat when I got to meet you and your wife, and you were telling me some really cool things, amazing things that have happened recently with her career and what she's been able to do. What was her, when you first told her, like, honey, I want to become a realtor? way back then, she already knew you were a gambler. Was there a part of her that thought, this is just Erik making another stupid gamble decision, that he's going to try something that's supposed to save the day, but really he's just, I mean, what was her reaction then, and how is that from then till now where she's at today? Just explain a little bit of that, because, relationships and our spouse, our greatest support, everything we do is for them and because of them. But talk about that.
I married the most incredible woman, but she had not yet developed the belief in herself early in our marriage. So we met at the church. She was a college age leader when I started working there. So I started working at church when I was 23 years old. She was 20, I was 23. We're both pouring into these youth, and our love story began there. So we've been together almost 20 years now. And in this time, early on in our marriage, I called all the shots. She was still a college student. I was a guy who had a world of experience from losing my mom and taking on all of this like adult responsibility very early on. And so I was really the shot caller. She was the wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, aspirational, hopeful. And so when I say I'm going to get my real estate license, she's like, okay, sounds great. Because she just trusted me and thought this is going to be great. I also, like any gambler does, and this is a gross generalization, but I think it's pretty accurate, is you operate on the rule of 10%. If I say I lost $100, I really lost 1,000. If I say I gambled once, I really gambled 10 times. And I was operating on the rule of giving my wife partial truths through it. So she didn't recognize the pain that we were in and the financial chaos that I had created. And so it's certainly not a thing that I'm proud of that I did, but I'm really proud of the growth that we've had since then. And so my wife was blissfully ignorant to it all. And so understand, I burned that bridge. My wife is an educator. She was an elementary school teacher for 17 years. And this summer chose to finally hang it up. She wanted to be better for herself, better for me, better for our kids. But in order to make that decision to do so, she had a lot of healing to do from the lack of trust that I instilled in her. Because she left me early on when I decided to get my real estate license. She left me in charge of making financial decisions for our family, understanding this is the best way to go. And then I completely violated that trust, not out of malicious intent, but out of a brokenness that I was trying to fix in so many different ways. And as we went through that, she's had to heal a lot, and I've had to heal a lot. And because of this career that I have in real estate, my wife hasn't had to teach for probably the last 10 years. Like, her financial income has been a nice addition to, but we've been able to function and operate solely on what I bring in for the last decade. But she hadn't been able to bring herself to a point to actually trust our finances and to trust me enough because of all the damage I had done previously. So for her to step away, yes, it was for her, but it was the greatest vote of confidence that she has ever given me, is to say, I trust you inherently, even though you were a bumbling idiot who lied to me all those years.
So I know you. I know you've dabbled a little bit in the good book that we call the Bible, and there's a story in there about a young man, Joseph, and how his life's pretty good, gets really bad. Because it got really bad, he finds himself in a place where it's 1,000 times better than it could ever have been, where he's actually able to help the people he loves most and help his whole nation. But do you feel like if you hadn't gone through those trials early on in your marriage, that you would still have ended up here? I mean, is there some sort of, I think it was Alex Hormozy that might have said this quote that I've been using all the time is calm seas never made a good sailor. I can't remember who said that, but it's kind of this principle, the struggle, the trial, what you went through then has now placed you where you can help your family, where you can help your community, you can help, maybe one day help the nation when you become governor of North Dakota. And
hard pass.
The John Dutton of North Dakota.
I had the privilege of going to the church that is still my home congregation and where I worked for 8 years. I got to go and speak to their middle school students. And I led off by saying, guys, I got to share with you my favorite scripture. It comes from Jebediah 2:22. And I said, everything happens for a reason. I go, you know that scripture, right? They're like, yeah. I go, is that Old Testament or New Testament? They're like, I think it's old. I'm like, well, there's no book called Jebediah, and that's not actually scripture. It is everything happens for a reason. And I went on to talk about how life happens for us, not to us. And there are those moments in time, whether it be the depression that you're fighting or the addiction that you're battling or the mistakes and the failures, those things happen. And sometimes people are quick to just say, well, everything happens for a reason, which means that we believe that God is manufacturing these hardships just so we learn something. But I don't think that God manufactured that kid to die in a car accident so I could learn a lesson. I think that life, unfortunately, happens. And sometimes it goes the way in which we want, and sometimes it doesn't. But regardless of that, I challenge these youth group kids to say, listen, life is happening for us, not to us. Again, what you're saying, Taylor, is right. Strong storms make for strong sailors, or whatever the quote is. The idea is the hardships that we face are preparing us for a really beautiful next chapter. My favorite grotesque analogy is if you are completely crapped on, defecated on by life, whether it be by somebody you're close to, life just happening, or your own mistakes, you can choose to let that manure pile sit and fester, or you can turn that into fertilizer. And it takes a while for that stank to go away and for that crop to strengthen. But it's that crap pile that literally strengthens the next harvest. And so for me, there's been those moments in time in my life when I have felt so downtrodden from my own mishaps, from my own failures, or life just unfolding. The market that we're in right now, I promise you, the challenges that are being faced today, those that choose to steady the course are going to be that much more precisionally skilled to handle the seas the next time around.
So let me ask you this, Eric, and I want to get into some of the happenings. I mean, today's a big day with the DOJ stuff, verdict coming down and whatever. What in a relationship, in a mentorship agreement, in a real estate, team structure, brokerage structure, whatever, you mentioned that there was a period where you felt like in your relationship you had been entrusted and that there was a violation of that trust. How have you found the ability to reestablish trust, or how can, if somebody's felt like their team leader has let them down, or their broker has let them down, or their spouse has let them down, like how do people reestablish trust in relationships when it's been broken? Because I mean, the divorce rate nationally is probably over 50% now.
I think it's 60 or so percent. Yeah.
Yeah. The number of teams that stay together, the number of team members that stay on a team long, even 12 months is not a very good statistic. And so, I think there's a lot of factors that contribute to it, but I think we're all very optimistic when we enter into marriages, when we enter into business relationships, when we enter into team agreements. And then, very rarely do those things live up to the glory with which we set them up with. And so how do we reestablish trust once it's gone or once it's broken?
I want to answer that in two parts, Joe. The first is, and I just did a writing today. I do a bunch of writings, and I try to write specifically to leaders. That's the thing that I'm most passionate about. And I am not a man that has arrived as a leader, but I'm a very, very passionate student about it. And it's a journey that I continue to venture on. And I wrote about how the number one problem in life, the number one frustration, are unmet expectations. that you expect something to go one way and it goes another, right? In your marriage, you maybe expect to have sex twice a week. And if it doesn't happen, you're immediately derailed. In your business, you maybe expect to make $100,000 your first year. If it doesn't go that way, you're really derailed. You maybe expect your leader to show up for you in a consistent sort of way. And if they don't show up, you're immediately up in arms about it. And rightfully so. I think that originally, the first part I want to answer in establishing trust is you have to have very, very clear expectations that are met and exceeded. In college, I worked at a Mexican restaurant in Fargo, North Dakota. And if you've never had great Mexican food, you got to come to Fargo. Okay.
El Bison or whatever it was called.
That's exactly right. My goal was to get to the table when they were sat as quick as possible. Okay. And I would greet them and I'd say, hey, I'm Erik. I'm going to be taking care of you. And then immediately I would lower their expectation. I would say, I just got triple sat, or we're short staffed, or I'm getting slammed right now, or there's a bartender that called in sick, or the kitchen's backed up. So I want you to know, if you need anything whatsoever, I need you to throw a chip at me or raise your hand. Because if I fail to get here, the last thing I want is for you to feel forgotten about. And immediately I watched them just like decompress. And they're like, okay, I was the best tipped person in that restaurant, not because I was the most attractive or because I was the fastest. It was because I set really clear expectations that I could consistently jump over. And so I think that for all of us as leaders and those of us in real estate, we try to tell people like, oh man, you're going to love real estate. You get to be your own boss and you make a ton of money and you have freedom and flexibility with your schedule. Well, the people who fail in this industry are people who are their own bosses and people who have freedom in their schedule, because they're leading with what appears to be the lag measure, the lead measure. The first thing that you have to do is, hey, this is going to be hellaciously hard. And so I make sure that anybody who I hire, and I make sure that anybody who is coming into my world, we declare the difficulties more than we declare the benefits. And so that's one of the ways to watch out for trust to erode, right? Because trust erodes from unmet expectations. Now, the flip side of that is what happens when that trust is actually eroded. I'll go back to 2008 when I told my wife. She, of course, melted down and was super frustrated. And then she said, I want to call my dad. And I was like, oh, crap.
Let's just keep this one between us. Like, let's just keep this here.
By the way, her dad is a lawyer turned judge. So, geez. Come on over, Tom. Great to have you. Your Honor. Great to have you. And he did such a good job of not berating me, but just listening. Okay. It was really simple, but it's taught me a lot of lessons over the years, is that in times of crisis or chaos or frustration or whatever else, your first move should not be to speak. Your first move should be to listen and to seek to understand. And he did that. He also said, and this is a little side piece, but he said to Emily, my wife, he said, Emily, it's not a matter of if Erik gambles again. It's a matter of when Erik gambles again. And that was such a great gift that he gave me. My first response was like, oh, dude, screw you. Like, I'm not going to gamble again.
Right.
But it has been a guide piece for me to recognize that I could derail 15 years of growth with one little mistake. And I want to prove him wrong. And I can't wait to continue to prove him wrong every day. And so in that, if you have eroded trust, unmet expectations with your spouse, with your team member, or anything else, my job would be literally to show up with a notebook in hand and to say, okay, Taylor, help me to know where I let you down. And I'm not going to listen to respond. I'm going to listen to learn. And then I'm going to rephrase and repeat, right? I'm going to reflect back to you to make sure I understood. And I'm going to let you let it all out. Now, I think for a lot of us, we don't create a safe space for people to name their frustration and their pain. And so it oozes out at inconvenient times. Mm-hmm. I think a better opportunity.
Well, because we really don't want the answer. We ask that question, but are we sure we want to know? You know what I mean?
My goal is to be moldable clay. My goal is to be someone who isn't stuck. And so I need to lean in. And here's the philosophy so many leaders say is like, hey, I have an open door policy. You can come to me at any time. But you have to understand that open door policy requires the other person to be courageous enough to walk through that door and to have so much pain and so much trust that they're going to bring that to you. I think that great leaders have open door policies because they go to their people. And what they do is they knock on the door and they say, hey, Joe, I really could use your help. In fact, those 4 key words are so powerful in any of this, in a marriage, in a business relationship. When you say, I need your help, you're inviting somebody in to help formulate and shape your future. And you're showing as yourself again as moldable clay. And in that moment, you're inviting them to give you truth. And so when you ask questions, if I were to say, hey, Joe, how am I doing as a leader? I feel like that's a really open-ended question that doesn't lead you to being super open with me. So if I'm the leader on your team and I go to you and I say, hey, Joe, how am I doing as a leader? You're going to be like, yeah, man, everything's cool. But if I said, Joe, what's the 1 or 2 things I can change in the next week or 2 that'll make your life better or easier? I always ask for 1 or 2, right? You put a number on it. So you're not giving it this like open-ended contract of like, hey, just tell me every last thing that isn't right. But I'll name, hey, what's 1 or 2 things I can do? And then I'll put a time frame on it. So it acts with specificity. It now forces an answer and it doesn't wait for them to come to me. And so how do I establish trust with somebody that I've broken it? Well, first I need to listen. Then after I listen really well, I rephrase and repeat and reflect it back to them. And then I need to continually go in and say, how am I doing? Help me to get better. I need your help. And then what's 1 or 2 things I can be doing? So it's a literal homework cadence. Accountability doesn't happen once. It happens every single day. And we need it as leaders, just as our team members need it.
Yeah. No, I think it's amazing. Taylor and I, we ran a tech company, and through that process, I discovered that my next door neighbor ended up being a huge Silicon Valley tech investor and creator, and like early on Twitter and all these things. So Taylor and I flew up to the Bay Area to meet with him, and it was a pretty short meeting in which we told him what we were building, and he honestly paid us the respect of being honest with us. And he ended up being right the whole time, which of course we're like, yeah, forget him. I mean, he was just like, let me just tell you guys, 98% of all technology and tech startups that make it and get significant funding come from the Silicon Valley. So the fact that you guys are in Las Vegas is strike number 1. Number 2, some of the brightest minds I'm aware of had tried to tackle the problem that you're trying to tackle, and they haven't been able to do it. No offense to you guys. You're very bright, but if these guys couldn't do it, the likelihood of you doing it, had we listened at that time, I mean, who knows what the world would have been like, but he honored us with the truth, because the truth is very hard. So talk about in bringing agents into a team, like as team leaders, and I know you're running the I think you call it the CEO circle. Am I right?
CEO Connect. Yeah. A weekly CEO spot Connect for CEOs to come and to grow and triage and to get a little bit better.
Which is amazing. Yeah. So team leaders and brokerage owners, they're always looking to attract talent. Now, the easiest way to attract people is to lie to them. And like, in our world, you are guaranteed to, generate $500,000 in GCI while taking every vacation you ever wanted to take and drive every sports car you ever wanted and get the hottest girl you've ever wanted to get. And it's like, if you just lie to them about what their world's going to be like, you'll have a lot of people come in the front door and out the back door. Mm-hmm. How do you optimistically create realistic expectations? Because we can't just go, oh yeah, welcome to the team. It kind of sucks and you're going to be depressed half the time. And like, you can't just paint the negative, but you can't just be completely overly unrealistically optimistic. So how do you strike that balance between setting real expectations and, putting a little bit of optimism in there?
If they're applying at least to be a real estate agent, I think that there is some hopeful optimism that's already there. They have been drawn to the lifestyle, the service, impact, the financial opportunity. Those are already alluring. I actually don't think I need to sell people on that. I treat hiring the same way I treated showing houses. Okay. If somebody raises their hand and they say, I want to go see houses with you, I want you to be my realtor, it was my responsibility and duty to point out the negative, not the positive. As an example, you see HGTV, people walk through and they say, well, this is the kitchen. Check out the beautiful cabinets and the countertops and the stainless appliances. And I look at that as a professional. I'm like, what a horrible representation of what great service actually looks like. Because if I was touring a house with you, Joe, and I was your realtor, I'd walk in and I'd be like, oh, immediately this flooring appears to be 8 to 10 years old and this carpet's probably at the end of its life. In addition to that, I noticed when we were walking in that the roof is about 20 to 25 years old. And so you're going to need to replace that in the next 5 to 10 years. On top of that, now, as I'm walking through, I'm picking up a little bit of a scent of a cat, right? And so I'm going to point out all the negatives as we go through there because they already said that they want the house. Similarly, somebody who comes to me to be a realtor already says that they want to be in real estate. My job, similar to the Mexican restaurant in Fargo, is to lower their expectations and to name all the things that can and will go wrong. Because if you put obstacles in front of somebody, my opinion is the right folks will jump over those obstacles. The people that are looking for the easy path are not the people that I want to lead. The people that are willing to do the hard things and follow the philosophy that everything is earned and nothing is given. We lay out a very clear path of where you are and where you can get to, what you're going to make every step of the way. And we make sure that we have a clear path. I think one of the great examples is this is prior to me starting my own real estate team, I was on a real estate team. I was a solo agent for a couple of years. I joined a team for a couple of years. And then since then I've been the team guy. So 17 years in the business now, I found myself in years 3 and 4, I'm on a real estate team and I'm a part-timer. I'm the only part-timer out of about 5 agents. And I outsold.
You were still doing the youth ministry at the time?
Yeah, correct. Full-time youth ministry. Okay. And this is right before I made the full switch. And so I'm selling 24 homes a year on a real estate team as a part-timer, outperforming everybody else. And about 70% of those deals were coming from my sphere and my work on open houses. So I was developing some confidence and I went to the team owners and I said, hey, how do I earn and this is intentional language. I said, how do I earn the opportunity to get a higher split? How do I earn the opportunity to do listings? Because I was only working on the buy side. And their response was, that's not how we're built. And so my response was within 30 days, I left the team because I had no more trajectory that was there. And so I'm intentional when I am bringing people in that I immediately show what can be, right? We can try to wow them with that picture of you're making $500,000 a year and working 20 hours a week. That's the thing that got them in the door in the first place. That's the thing that got them excited about being in real estate. But I'm going to share with them and say, listen, phase 1, you're going to make this. Phase 2, you're going to make this. This is how long of time on average you're going to be in each phase. And the response that I never want to give anybody is, sorry, that's not how we're built. And instead, I'm going to continue to make my world so big that you can continue to grow within it. And we've had a pretty rich history over the last decade of bringing in people that have changed their stars, the trajectory of their entire lives. And they've forced me to rehash how I do things because they've been such great talent. But had I not cast that vision early on, had I not talked to them about chapter 10 that we're still together, and instead, if I just stayed in this like tight little box and expected them to live in it, I don't think I'd have near the success that I've had today.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, what are you excited about heading into 2024? I mean, information's still coming out, but obviously this lawsuit and 1.78 billion in damages were awarded. What are you?
Did I just missed that?
It just came out an hour ago. Yeah,
I have not seen that.
And so it was in Missouri. I'm sure there'll be appeals and all that stuff. I don't know that a jury of homeowners in Missouri are the ideal group to decide the entire fate of the buyer business in the real estate industry. But as it is, that's what came down. What are the market is more challenging than we'd like it to be. Interest rates are higher than we would like it to be. What are you excited about? Where do you see opportunity moving forward for agents and teams, knowing that there's DOJ, buyer compensation conversations, there's commission compression, there's all these different things happening in our industry. There's always opportunity, though. So what are you excited about opportunity-wise for agents and teams?
So Joe, you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it was of this similar vein. And I don't know if I said these words to you then, but I'm going to say them now. And that is, whatever you're looking for, you'll find. If you're looking for the problems in this real estate industry and the hardships that are ahead of us, it is going to be a really tough uphill battle. For me, I'm choosing to see the opportunity that's in this. One of my greatest gifts is the ability to pivot, to strategize, and to activate. And so our hand is being forced on how we pivot and how we change. And the innovative people, the folks that are permeable in how they operate, the people that are willing to do things in new ways to achieve new results, are going to capture an unfair share very early on. And so to the innovators that are out there, the Joes, the Taylors, the Eriks, this is our gathering season. We're also eliminating a lot of the unnecessary people in this industry. Don't get me wrong. 1.6 million realtors is a great way for a bunch of people to have their real estate license. But I think that in times like this, people seek out community. They seek out training. They seek out alignment. They're looking for leaders to go first. I've written a couple of books, right? I wrote a book called Play for the Person Next to You. It's a servant leadership book. Then I wrote The Perfect Real Estate Agent Blueprint. My next book, as I'm flirting with titles, what I keep going towards is that leaders go first. Simon Sinek wrote a book, which is so fantastic. It calls Leaders Eat Last. And it's this idea that you make sure that other people speak, that other people give their insight before you're the one to jump in, because if you're the leader, people will automatically follow that. And I think that I parallel leadership and entrepreneurship in a lot of great ways. And right now is a chance for folks to jump in and to do new things and to go first and to break the mold and break through some glass ceilings, because it's going to be the Joes, Taylors, and Eriks of the world that are going to create a greater community and a greater sense of doing this business in the next chapter. So I'm thrilled for the next chapter. Every one of us through the last couple of years has looked the same. And we are not the same. We are very, very different. And if you have an inherent gift, it's time to glamorize it and glorify it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Taylor. I don't know what the actual statistics are, but if there's 2 million realtors in North America, I would imagine the vast majority of listings are taken by 200,000 of them. That there's a lot of inactive realtors, and then there's a lot of agents who just are primarily buyer-focused agents. Then you have this dynamic in our industry where none of us have ever really had to justify buyer-agent commission. There's been a little bit of it when you approach a for sale by owner who's not offering a compensation for bringing a buyer and have to negotiate a commission at that point. But again, as I taught a class yesterday, and I was saying, we're very much used to saying, hey, Erik, you bought this house for $300,000. It's now worth $500,000. Our commission rate is X, and of that, I'm going to pay a buyer's agent Y. And you're still going to net significantly more than what you paid for the home. So we're basically, compensation is coming from a portion of the growth. If we move into a world where buyer's agents have to now say, Erik, I would love to be your real estate agent, and as your representative, here are the things I'm going to do, and here is my standard rate for that opportunity. There are somewhere around 1 million to 1.5 buyer agent specific real estate agents who've never had to have that conversation. To me, that's the fascinating thing in this, is even getting a buyer brokerage agreement signed in the past has been sign this, I'm going to be compensated by the listing agent on this transaction. So my services to you are relatively, whatever the cost is. So Taylor, what are your thoughts on that? Because this is something agents have just never had to even negotiate, let alone discuss buyer agent compensation with their clients.
Yeah. I looking at this whole thing, and we've had so many conversations about this. The two things that will never change are what's most important to the seller and what's most important to the buyer. What's most important to the seller is I want to sell my house for as much money as I can. What's most important to the buyer is I want to get the best deal on a house that I love more than any other house on the block. And somewhat to Erik's point, the agents that understand those two problems and know how to solve them are going to do amazing. And the seller, as far as like, did the 3% that the sellers had to pay to the buyer's agent, did that ruin their life? Did they lose so much money because of that now they have a right to sue to take part in this $5 billion settlement? I don't know that would have made a huge difference in their life, but the fact that they still want to sell their house and they want to get as much money as possible and sell it as quick as they can in most situations, I think the buyer's agents that figure out how to solve that problem, and also the sellers, the listing agents, they're still going to be trying to figure out how to bring those buyers in. So I don't know that it's going to change that much, regardless of whatever the outcome is. I think there'll be they'll shuffle around what we call it and the way that it's written down on paper and the way that you have to get access to those commissions and to that money. But in the long run, I believe that sellers are still going to end up paying pretty much the same amount, whether it's in buyers' closing costs or different incentives and ways to move their property, because they still have to move the property, and to get to the access to the buyers, they're still going to have to access it. So to your question, as far as these buyers agents that have never had to deal with a buyer broker agreement, it's going to come to us. It's going to come to those that are leading to figure out solutions, how we can train and how we can implement and how we can arm these people that want to feed their families and want to succeed and are really good real estate agents. We're going to have to teach them. And I think if we can figure out that problem, then we can.
Then we'll win. Yeah. And I think it's interesting that the easiest analogy for me to draw upon is that being a listing agent will somewhat be similar to being like a personal injury type of attorney, where your primary role and responsibility is to maximize the creation of theoretical profit that isn't costing you, quote unquote, money out of your pocket. A buyer's agent, it will almost, the easiest, assuming these changes come to pass, the easiest way for me to think of it is a buyer's agent is now going to be similar to like a family law type of attorney or a defense attorney, where there's a negotiated cost for service. And I think that's just, again, maybe nothing changes. Maybe it goes on appeals and then business as usual. But I think there's going to be some modifications. I know now in the state of Nevada, our brokerage is saying you have to have a buyer brokerage agreement. That hasn't been a required document by our brokerage in the past. So that's like rule number one is, hey, you got to get the buyer brokerage agreement signed. So I'm just fascinated by what changes will come about. And to your point, Erik, I think I know when I first got into this industry and I didn't understand contracts, I was almost paralyzed by my lack of understanding.
Yeah.
I think that buyer's agents need to be very careful that they don't allow themselves to be paralyzed by fear of taking action. I think now's the time for education. Now's the time for guidance. Now's the time to go to trusted individuals at whatever brokerage you're affiliated with. Make sure you're getting the scoop and the advice from the legal counsel and from the ownership of the brokerage and from your local broker. And like, you need to know so that you don't A, take missteps, and B, take no steps. Am I right, Erik?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And for as long as I've been running a team, we've been mandating that you have a buyer brokerage agreement signed before you ever start showing houses. Now that has loosened over time, and the Zillow Go shows and that sort of the world has changed the way in which some of that rhythm has been. But our state has, and the way in which we've operated as a team has required that. So even so, we would make sure that our agents were trained and seasoned well enough to capture 3% regardless of what the co-broke was. And so these are conversations that we've been having for a decade, is if they're offering 2% and our standard is 3%, this is how you get 3% every time, because that's what we're worth. And so these are conversations that will be new for a lot of agents, and there's an opportunity for them to maturate and grow. But it's also separation season for those of us that are really seasoned with it. And we'll be able to do so with ease without many hiccups, where other people are really going to stumble and fumble. And the clients that we serve will notice the difference.
I love it. How do people get in touch with the great Erik? Erik, you got a middle name?
Robert.
Erik and Bobby Hatch. How do people get in touch with Bobby Hatch?
You can find me on Instagram. It's probably the easiest place. Real Erik Hatch. That's Erik with a K. Real Erik Hatch. Find me on the Instagrams, or hatchcoaching.com is where we have all of our stuff. We have a great YouTube channel, and we put out content on the daily.
Okay, bro, we appreciate you. We're so grateful for your time. We could talk for hours. I mean, to your point, I think one of the biggest benefits of being at Real is the exposure on a national basis to some of the brightest minds in real estate. We're grateful for that. Obviously, we're a place partner. You're a place partner. We both believe in a lot of things that are happening there. So there's so many parallels between our business. And the thing I love about doing this is it's really cool to say, like, hey, here's what we're dealing with in North Dakota. Here's what we're dealing with in Vegas. Here's what we're dealing with in Canada. And just to be able to see different perspectives, because while there's way more similarities than differences, it's just good to get different perspectives from people. And so,
well, and I've always, for my whole life, I've always struggled when I meet a person who is funny, handsome, and like wise. It's always this jealousy just kicks in, and it's so hard. But with you, I felt that way when I first met you, but the more time that I spend with you, it's just like you're so genuine. You're just so loving and so kind and so good at what you do, that you've really helped me to get over. Even though somebody has the trifecta of greatness, I can still just not have that jealousy kick in. So I appreciate it.
I am definitely the Justin Timberlake of real estate. So yeah, it's a triple threat. You better watch out.
Yeah. When your wife,
Justin Bieber, Justin Timberlake, I just named you Justin.
Yeah, when your wife walked onto that boat, I just said, "Here is a happy woman." Like, and here's a. Let me just tell you, to be honest, Erik, here's the thing, dude. I love how honest you've been with your past struggles. And like, it was an honor to meet your wife. And I'm so happy that she was able to step away from her profession. And to be honest, as just like a bro, I'm just so proud of you for saying, like, here was my struggle. Here was my weakness. Here's how I'm working to overcome it daily. Here's how I'm building my relationship with my spouse. Here's how I'm building my business. It's just so refreshing to have somebody honest, and like, as much as I could say like a big brother, like, I'm proud of you. Like, dude, I am. I'm proud to see that you're in the grind. You're still honest and raw about it. And dude, I'm rooting for you from the bottom. Like, I'm looking up to you going, like, keep going. I'm like the astronaut that got left behind watching like Apollo 11 soar to the moon. So anyways, I'm super proud of you, bro. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Nothing great grows in the shadows. So I got to pull it from the dark to the light.
Love it. Thanks, buddy.